Hello and welcome back to I Say I Were Wrong, and today I'd like to do a quick reflection of the past year and talk about some of my favourite things that I watched / read / listened to and kind of give a life update on what happened. So basically this year's just been an absolutely monumental year of change for me, and I wanted to get a lot more videos out, especially my Doctor Who ones, which have been doing very well. Thank you very much everyone for watching them. And because of that, I have not had the most amount of time to relax and chill and watch some programmes, but I have watched some which have absolutely dominated what I've been thinking about. So, quick shout out to Around the World in 80 Days. That was a brilliant way to kickstart my year, and immediately after that I realised The Terror was on BBC iPlayer, so I decided to watch that and see what everybody was talking about. And the Christmas period always comes with a little extra time to watch TV, and I chose to check out The Terror, which really did set off the year to a fantastic start. Previously, I had read Erebus by Michael Palin, which was written after the discovery of the HMS Erebus in 2014 and the subsequent investigation into what actually happened to it. So I was extremely excited to check out this kind of fictionalised account of it. I absolutely adored this programme. It was beautifully shot, wonderfully acted, and has had the highest calibre of tension possible. Jared Harris is one of my favourite actors of all time, and his character Crozier wonderfully portrayed the outsider to the British Navy that was good for this type of show. Anyway, this show was about the HMS Terror and the HMS Erebus, which went sailing and searching for the Northwest Passage, a piece of sea to connect the west to the east without having to go round the Cape of Africa. Due to Captain Franklin's hubris, they essentially get stuck in the ice where they are picked off one by some mysterious force. Between that and trying to be destroyed by the elements and some other stuff, they have to try and survive. It is extremely atmospheric, gothic and ghostly throughout, evoking a deep sense of claustrophobia and foreboding. You can see that even without the supernatural element, they would still be unravelling at the same degree. Also, in this month, I read the same novel by Dan Simmons and absolutely hated it. I felt that misogynistic and racist compared to the TV show. All the women in the show feel like actual human beings rather than a virtually sexual way they were portrayed in the novel. Also, Lady Silence, Silna, was actually portrayed as in control of her own life rather than following the British orders. On the whole, I love polar exploration stories where men's colonial hubris is their inevitable downfall, even when they're repenting in death. Some of my favourite characters are Silna, who is the only one I truly think did nothing wrong. Good Sir, to be fair, is sort of a baby and deserved better, but I deserved his arc and how it ended. I felt it suited him well. Jobson made me feel the absolute worst though, but on the whole, Crozier was given brilliant life by Jared Harris and is just a perfect character. Even though it's well considered, I still think that it is an underrated show that everyone should check out. So in general, the start of the year was quite slow, and so when I had the chance to take a quick trip down to England to check out some nice historical landmarks, I thought I better take it to make some excitement before that absolute crunch of exam season came along in May. And it was at this time that I decided to start the Dracula project. Now, if you know me in real life, you know that for a number of years, Dracula has been a sort of obsession of mine. And recently, well, I say recently, it was in February, I went down to Whitby, where some of my friends and I took some videos and I decided then, while watching an extremely bad video on a museum about Dracula, that I was going to try and rank every single adaptation of the novel to exist. Now, at the time, I thought, okay, that's not going to be too bad. There can't have been that many. And then I started digging, and I realised, oh, there's quite a lot of this. And then came along Dracula Daily, which, if you don't know, was basically every single day, or every dated day, in the novel, they sent out an email with that part of the novel in it. And it was a very, very good way of experiencing what Dracula was like as a cultural phenomenon, because I saw in real life how a lot of people didn't actually know how the plot took place. And because of that, it kind of spurred my inspiration even more, and it turned into a bigger thing than just ranking the adaptations. I wanted to do a full-blown documentary on how Dracula was adapted and how the adaptations influenced other adaptations, and that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy came along. And then that spiraled when I realised how many TV shows, how many games, how many films, how many documentaries, how many audios, how many comics, how many books, everything. And it is the start of the Dracula project, which is officially going to be a series, a small series of documentaries detailing the adaptations and how they kind of came about and where they went from there. In total, at the moment, I have got 350 different films and 110 different TV programmes, some of which are only just a couple of episodes each, which adapt Dracula in some way. And I plan to release this fully fledged documentary series hopefully late next year, so stay tuned. On the subject of Dracula adaptations I have watched and enjoyed, my favourite film so far has been the 1958 Hammer horror classic featuring Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. And my favourite TV show has been Moffat and Gatiss' 2020 miniseries Dracula featuring Clay Bangs and Dolly Wells. Now, that last one might be a surprise to people because it's not actually a very good adaptation, but it is a brilliant Dracula programme. And I think I'm going to adapt or discuss how the difference of that comes later. So I hope you check that out with me. So that consumed my February, my March, and as April was approaching, my final exam season was also approaching. I was finishing my master's degree in astrophysics, and I was starting to get very stressed out about the fact that these last exams would basically determine what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And it was then that I decided to cling on to something that would give me a little bit of enjoyment, and that's when I found Sanctuary, the TV show. So basically, I discovered this by Tumblr. I was on my dash and I saw someone reblog a gift set of what seemed to be Victorian scientists, and then reblog another gift set tagged with the same thing, Sanctuary, and it was modern day times, and one of those scientists was a vampire, and he seemed to be called Nikola Tesla, and I was like, this is interesting, I better check this out. So basically, Sanctuary is a Canadian sci-fi show that aired in the late 20s, so like 2007 to about 2011. And immediately after I watched the pilot, I became obsessed with it. I managed to limit myself to only watching 3 episodes a night, which I managed to do, and it carried me through all the way through exam season, and I watched the final episode close to when my final exam was, so it kind of kept me company all the way through there. It has the same sort of vibes as the sci-fi show Warehouse 13 and The Librarians, while also having a nice kind of unique spin to it. It definitely can be a bit cheesy at times, and it's the kind of effects aren't the best. It's 2007, you know, what can you say? However, it's just brilliant to watch. It follows the Sanctuary, which is essentially this safe place that a doctor named Helen Magnus set up for abnormals, and these abnormals are like supernatural creatures that live among us. Along with her daughter, Ashley, a psychologist, Will, a techie Henry, and the resident dad, Big Guy, they essentially go around and help people and solve problems around the world. But what I absolutely adored about this programme was its side characters, mainly those that they call the Five. You see, Helen Magnus is actually an immortal Victorian scientist who, along with a few of her friends, experimented with vampire blood, and that caused them all to be abnormals. Well, Helen got the gift of immortality. Nikola Tesla became a vampire. James Watson, who was the inspiration for Sherlock, gained brand new brain skills. And Nigel Griffin, who was another scientist, became the Invisible Man. But last but not least, which is probably my favourite character throughout this series because of just how complex he is, and that is John Druitt, who was Helen's fiancé. He gained the ability to teleport, but it came with a terrible curse that he was driven mad with bloodlust, so he just wanted to kill people constantly. This kind of relationship between Helen and Druitt is honestly one of the best parts of this show for me, and the actors carry it effortlessly. The complicated kind of lovers to enemies backstory that essentially the series opens with those two, and that kind of mellows out and develops throughout the run, is absolutely heartbreaking and really, really intricate. And just watching it, I want so much more from it. Like, I want more of this storyline. It has kind of understandingly found family vibes throughout it, and most importantly focuses on the goodness of life and kind of helping people. Without wanting to spoil it too much, I'm going to mention my top 5 episodes, as it's very much an episodic story with only small overarching plots. So from season 1, it's season 1 episode 5, Kush. This is the moment that I probably realised that this show was kind of perfectly designed for me. Sanctuary really works well with bottle episodes or Base Under Seas episodes. So basically really, really small character focus driven pieces and kind of thrillers at the same time. This one is kind of the first of this in the season 1 and kind of the start of really, really good character work, especially for Helen, Magnus and Will. It is very much a homage to The Thing, but it's working in one of the kind of character focused narratives that makes me actually enjoy this a lot more than The Thing itself. Magnus, who has come across as quite removed and kind of separate to the rest of the group, shines as kind of her trauma with what happened to her ex-fiancé and everything like that kind of comes to light in this very, very claustrophobic and narrow setting. It's essentially in the middle of the Kush mountain range where the plane that Helen and Magnus and Will were on were crashed. There's an abnormal causing everybody to hallucinate and causing them to end up killing themselves one by one. One of the issues I had with The Thing was that somewhat fixed space, making for this one really, really working well because there was just so much kind of the lack of characterization I feel in The Thing really spoiled it for me. I just didn't really like anybody, whereas this, I was kind of attached to the majority of people in this. So it really, really worked a lot better. Also, they helped strengthen the bonds between Will and Magnus, and it fully kind of cements them as a family towards the end of this season. You know, it's just a lovely little family that you're going to end up rooting for and hoping for. And that kind of moves on to season 3, episode 17, Normandy. Now, this is actually a really, really different episode to majority of the episodes so far, or ever since, to be fair, and that is it's entirely kind of combined within a flashback, but it's different from other ones that we've seen so far. This is kind of set in between where the 5 took the vampire blood and became abnormals, and now present day. And it's set directly halfway in between during the invasion of Normandy and D-Day, the D-Day landings, and Helen, Watson and Griffin basically go undercover to find out what the Nazis are up to in Normandy, and Tesla remains organising everything from London with a bottle of wine and his sharp wit. It's so funny to see how the beginning of the episode, it kind of seems a lot lighter, and then it gets darker and darker and darker as farther into occupied France they get to. It is also very, very character focused and all works mainly as a prologue to the next episode, which is a lot more plot focused for the overarching story. But at its core, it's another character piece that expands on the relationships that have only been alluded to before, especially in the episode between Druitt and Watson. So it kind of sets up previously that everybody, the five, were best friends before this all stuff kind of went down. And from that 100 years since they took the vampire blood, they've been kind of building up the fractions of their life and trying to repair everything that they can. And this is kind of something where it all comes to the head and you're like, are they going to repair it or are they going to break again? And it sort of does both in a really, really expertly way. And it was just how the actions of Druitt has destroyed the relationship between Druitt and Watson. And you know what? There's not enough Griffin content in the world, and this is why I really like this episode too. It just really works really well, and I kind of want more of them at different stages throughout their relationships. And I knew it would be, but I know if we did that, it'd be a very different show, so it wouldn't really work as well. And finally, season 3, episode 19, Out of the Blue. This is another one which is very, very character focused. You can probably tell which ones I like the most. So most of these are really, really experimental episodes in season 3 especially. And Will and Helen basically are in this neighbourhood. They don't know anything about the sanctuary. Will is a surgeon and Helen is an artist. And it's basically their psyche is breaking down and they're in this sort of alternate reality thing where they're believing things are happening, but it's not. It works really well, especially because in season 4, Helen starts questioning, obviously, her past and what she's doing with the sanctuary. And this is a really, really nice kind of companion piece to that questioning and like what is the kind of life that she's assigned to lead and that sort of thing. On the whole, this TV show is something that I will think about, and I honestly still do think about it like 7-8 months down the line. And I really, really enjoyed the performances of Amanda Tapping and Christopher Hendrell. As much as I am actively searching for anything that they did, like I'm checking out Stargate and I'm checking out things like Van Helsing just for those two particular actors. It's just wonderful stuff. And that was probably the biggest focus of my year at that point. And after that, I like refused to watch anything for a good couple of months because all I could think about was that show. And it really worked out because in that couple of months following was just chaos. I graduated with a degree and I decided to travel for a bit. I went to Italy and I went to Copenhagen. And then finally I came back, moved to another town and started my PhD, also in astronomy. That is when I listened to Islander. So Islander is an album released in 2020 and is a wonderful, wonderful musical. It was conceived by Amy Draper, written by Fran Anderson, and with a book by Stuart Melton. It's essentially a Scottish musical that premiered on the Isle of Mull and then toured and did the Edinburgh Fringe, going to the West End, and then finally getting to Off-Broadway in 2020. And it draws deeply from Scottish mythology and basically follows the life of Ailey and the events of a vote to depopulate an island and move to the mainland. A mysterious stranger wakes up on her shore and her life is changed forever, essentially. It's all performed by 2 actresses playing a range of different roles, and the music is a mix between a cappella and traditional Scottish pieces. In fact, I listened to this album so much over the course of the month that this kind of the top song of the year, There Is a Baby Girl, comes from this album. What I adore most about it is that it captures wonderfully the like Islander vibes. So it is called Islander, but like the Highland and island culture is just captured so nicely throughout it. And I don't think I've ever kind of come across anything like this before. But in particular, it reminded me of the books The Gloaming and The Gracekeepers, both by Kirsty Logan. And although I don't think it actually does have a sapphic relationship in it, for some reason it really gives me sapphic vibes, probably because I relate it to those 2 novels by Kirsty Logan. I was also close to the water while I was listening to this for the majority of the time, so it really, really kind of tied into the whole atmospheric thing I was feeling. So I would highly recommend it if you kind of fancy a different type of musical that you've kind of never listened to before. Then I started my PhD, things were hectic. My laptop broke and I couldn't edit any videos. So essentially I was just twiddling my fingers, waiting for my laptop to be fixed, which, by the way, hasn't happened yet. I've only just got my laptop back and it's still broken. That is why I haven't uploaded any videos in the last 100 days, is because I've been waiting on my laptop coming back. But that gave me some time to kind of kick back and do some reading, which I'd been meaning to do. And that's when I read Madhouse at the End of the World. Now, as you can probably see from previous things that I have enjoyed, I'm a big fan of books which have the theme of polar exploration and getting stuck in the ice. Like Erebus by Michael Palin, this is a non-fiction book dedicated to the story of a research expedition to the Antarctica. Included in this was the story of Frederick Crook and the first voyage of famed explorer Roald Amundsen. The expedition was that of the Belgica, a ship in a South Pole attempt from Belgium, with a number of crew members and the ship itself from Norway. It was written by Julian Sancton and released in 2021. For a book dedicated to the Arctic, it surprises the reader by starting out in a prison and then provides a story to reach up to that point. Framing this well-researched novel in a sort of recounting of a tale, it combines with the kind of story-like way of narration, and it creates a tale that's just kind of woven through history, and it's just really, really nice to read in that kind of aspect. The advantage of this expedition being much closer than some of the others, like the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, is that we have well-documented photographs taken all the way through both the preparation, the voyage, and the return of this ship. It's very, very evocative and impactful, which is just fascinating, and I can't wait to read more about different Arctic explorations. And then last but not least, because I was kind of waiting for things to happen, I wasn't really doing much, I decided that I was going to try and watch 31 films during October of the classic horror genre, so that I would kind of become more well-versed in classic horror. And that's when it happened. That is when I found my favourite film of the year. Probably my favourite thing of the year. I don't think anything could come close to how good this was. Well, maybe Sanctuary, but it's completely different, so I'll allow it. And that was bum 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 bum, The Wicker Man from 1973. Now, this isn't the Nick Cage one with the bees, but it is still absolute masterpiece in the film. I watched, in that 31 days, I watched things like Saw, Halloween. However, this film just completely took me over, and I abandoned my 31 films for the 31 days and just completely just watched this about 6 times in a couple of weeks. I just became obsessed with it. The Wicker Man is a folk horror classic released in 1973. Some absolute icons of horror are in this film, including Christopher Lee and Ingrid Pitt. And so the story follows a strict Christian policeman who comes to a remote Scottish island to investigate the case of a missing child. That essentially from the start, you know nothing about anything. You're like, okay, well, let's follow this policeman. And then you realise that this policeman is kind of an arsehole. He's kind of really, really uptight and strict and very, very religious. And the whole islanders are just not the same. They're very, very free, very sexual, very open, and it kind of creates this conflict between them right from the start. I would highly recommend going into this film completely blind if you can, because I think it does wonders for the actual tension in the horror building. So if you don't want to get it spoiled, kind of stop here, because I will talk about the ending somewhat, and go and watch it. Anyway, not only is the acting superb, every single part of this film works so well together that I have watched it so many times and found different parts and different bits that I've loved every single time around. Everything's so special, and the soundtrack as well was beautifully constructed from Scottish and English folk music, weaving the score with the same themes of colonialism and religion that the plot and the characterisation also focuses on. The fact that this is a musical in a way that surprised me in the beginning, because I wasn't expecting it from this kind of genre, but it works so well and really focuses the central conflict between Sergeant Howie and the rest of the islanders. Music is the main weapon that the islanders use throughout the beginning half of the film, and even kind of some of the climaxes, like Willow's song, for example. It is used against Howie to try and prevent him from doing his job or whatnot. The only kind of straw that Howie has throughout it with connection to music is hymns at the church at the very start, and then you can see him completely drop off and he's not even involved in the music for the rest of it. Basically, just like every single thing is just so perfectly put together from the cinematography to, it's just absolutely perfectly. And by the end comes around, you're just so caught up in it, and it's just wonderful to watch. So I would highly recommend and check that one out.
Come. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
And basically that's all I've been thinking about for the last couple of months. And finally I've got my laptop back, and this will be the first video that goes up, hopefully before the new year. And I will get my next Doctor Who video up, which will either be my first Doctor ranking or my season 5 video, and you'll be able to see that. But what were your highlights of the year? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you like this, give it a like and subscribe if you want to. Alright, thank you, bye bye.